Good morning, friends from Ollie and I, and welcome to just a chill, casual hangout with me and hopefully do a little bit of reading vlog. Thank you so much for all of your kind words and support on my previous video. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me to know that there are people here who are just happy for me to do whatever I'm capable of, and to just kind of, I don't know, spend time with me when I do get a chance to put up a video. And so this week I just wanted to make it very chill and simple for myself, kind of go back to what we did last year when I was struggling and do some casual little vlogs. And obviously Ollie will be along for the ride, so enjoy that. I do have a couple of things on today, which we'll get to, but first I thought we could have a bit of a catch up of what I've been reading, which isn't much, and talk about what I hope to read in this video. So I'm filming this the Thursday after my last video about my reading wrap up and stuff came out, and I still haven't read anything. I still have not finished a book. I think it's been 3 weeks now. The only things I have been reading are just some literary magazines. I used to love literary magazines. I used to get them delivered, like have a subscription and everything, and then, I don't know, I just stopped at some point. So I picked up 2 latest editions of 2 of my old favorites, and I thought I could just see what they're up to and see if I maybe want to get back into this. The first is Overland, and isn't this such a beautiful cover for this edition? It's just amazing. I have actually read through most of this, or read through what I want to read anyway. Overland is like a radical literary magazine, and so like there are some non-fiction essays and discussions in here which were interesting, but an awful lot of it is more fiction. And despite this beautiful cover, there actually is not a lot of discussion in this edition about Gaza or about Palestine. The only real focus was in the editorial letter, written by Evelyn and Jonathan, who, from what I understand, were copping a lot of flack for showing support for Palestine, both on their socials and I think in the previous edition of the magazine. And so basically they were saying, like, we stand with oppressed people and we're going to keep doing it, so fuck yeah. And then the other one, from memory, was my favorite of the magazines that I used to get, and it is Arena. This one I'm still making my way through. I've only read the first couple of essays and articles. My favorite so far was actually the longest of the lot. It was called Endgame for Beginners by Alison Browanowski. And in this article, Alison essentially discusses Australian foreign policy. She talks a bit about Gaza and what's happening in Gaza and like Australia's response to it. But primarily she's kind of putting that in the context of Australians' foreign policy and how it is basically whatever the US tells us to do. For decades now, we haven't had a substantial foreign policy of our own. Alison literally describes Australia as a foreign policy black hole, which is something like I think most Australians know, right? Is that, yeah, it's kind of a joke that when Daddy America tells us to jump, we say how high. But I think it's become especially like heavy lately because Anthony Albanese, our current Prime Minister, used to be very pro-Palestine. And while part of that is stuff I already knew, how like the kind of imaginary threat of China and us being essentially in Asia, even though we don't like to consider ourselves part of Asia, our foreign policy is more or less to do whatever America tells us to do in the promise that if China were ever to invade us, America would come to our rescue. That's the backbone of our foreign policy, and that explains an awful lot of why Anthony Albanese has absolutely no backbone and is going to be remembered as the Prime Minister for genocide, despite him, in theory, supporting Palestine. Anyway, all of that is to say that I liked Overland, but I'm really enjoying Arena. I think why I wanted to come back to these magazines is that obviously I stay up to date with kind of like what's happening in the moment through social media and through signal groups and all of that sort of stuff. And I read plenty of political analysis in books, but I'm not great at keeping up with more kind of like the think pieces that are happening in response to what's going on. Because for me, at least, reading sort of longer form content just on my phone or on my iPad or on a screen, I find that very difficult. So it's kind of that in-between content that I tend to miss out on, like the more analysis that obviously takes a couple of months to write about what's been happening. And there's heaps of that stuff going around on the internet, which is great, but I just don't tend to read it. So yeah, that's kind of where these magazines come in, and I'm really enjoying them, even if I am taking my time with them. Now for the book that we're going to be reading together in this video. It was my Blossom Book Club pick for April, and I have not started it yet. And I've already pushed back our live chat. It usually happens on either the last Monday of the month or the first Monday of the following month. And while I'm not confident I will be able to finish this entire book before Monday when we're going to do our live chat, I would like to at least give it a good go. And that book is Beyond Survival: Strategies and Stories from the Transformative Justice Movement. This is a collection of essays, and one of the editors, Leah Lakshmi, is the author of a book called Care Work, which we also read together and is one of my favorite books. So this book has been on my radar for a little while. I've had it on my shelf since last year, and I was so thrilled when the patrons selected this as our book club pick. Now I just need to get to actually read it so that we can chat about it, which I'm really looking forward to. This will be my second explicitly transformative justice kind of abolitionist book after reading We Do This Till We Free Us several months ago. I read it late 2023 and I really enjoyed it. So I have high hopes for this one. Anyway, the two things that I have on the agenda that I have to do today is one is an appointment. It's just through telehealth for my allergy injections. The other thing though, I do have to leave the house for, which I'm not thrilled about, but I'm sure it'll be fine and I can take Ollie. I have a half rack at Gathering Threads again. If you were watching my vlogs last year, you might remember that I set up a rack with Mum at this secondhand consignment store. Basically, it's like this little community sort of space where you can pay a pretty reasonable fee to hire out a rack for a month, and then you can sell your clothes and they take a commission. And it's just really good vibes there. I really like it. So I set mine up on the weekend on Sunday, and I've already sold a couple of items. So I need to kind of pick out a couple of other items that I've got on my not wearing enough list, put a tag on them, and then we need to head into Gathering Threads to put them on my rack. Aside from that, we're going to take it pretty easy because I'm still recovering, honestly, from Tuesday night. There was obviously the snap rally for Hands Off Ruffer. So I had a very chill day yesterday, but I'm still feeling like I need to take it pretty easy today. So we've got those two things on the agenda, and I think other than that, we're just going to take it easy and hopefully do some reading. What do you think, Ollie? Let's go pick some clothes to add to the rack. Kind of late actually, and starting to get dark. I was reading heaps and didn't even realize what time it was. We had a lovely little outing this morning, went to Gathering Threads, had some breakfast, even went to the dog park. Ollie's had a great day. That appointment with my allergy specialist, I actually got the day wrong. It's tomorrow, which meant that once we got home, I was feeling pretty tired. It was just a very chill, relaxing afternoon, and I just read for most of the afternoon, which is something I have not done in ages. So, of course, I have been reading Beyond Survival, and I have read part 1. I'm up to part 2, so I've read just over 80 pages. But first, I wanted to show you something quickly. It came in the mail. I ordered from a company here they're based in Melbourne, but the owners are from Jordan. So they get a bunch of stuff imported from Jordan to then sell here in Australia. And obviously, keffirs from Palestine specifically are very hard to come by at the moment, but I was in the market for something. I mean, I have my white one with the red, black and green thread, like very Palestine, that I wear to protests and plenty of other things all the time. But I really wanted, I've seen some just very beautiful kind of like colorful ones, and I just wanted one, I don't know, that I could kind of wear almost like in place of a scarf this winter, so I could get a bit more wear out of it, a bit more solidarity, and also kind of like covert solidarity when it's needed, if you know what I mean. So anyway, they had this beautiful one on their website, again, made in Jordan, but quite similar in design. And it's just green with black thread. And green is like one of my most worn colors. It's probably like my version of neutral. And I just thought this was really pretty. So I'm very happy to have this, and I'm sure I'm gonna get lots and lots of wear out of it. And also just kind of cool to support a local family business. They're literally like a few suburbs over from me. Anyway, back to the book. It is obviously pretty heavy going. I mean, the subtitle of this is literally Strategies and Stories from the Transformative Justice Movement. And I feel like the first part in particular was very heavy on the stories element. The first part is called Making the Road by Dreaming, Stories of Accountability. And there was like 5 or 6 different articles. Some of them were a little bit more, I suppose, strategy focused. For example, there was an entry by Kai Chang Tom, who I have read from before, called What to Do When You've Been Abusive. And they literally outline like steps, like the first one being listen to the survivor, the second take responsibility for the abuse. And I did an awful lot of highlighting in this section in particular under the take the survivor's lead and face the fear of accountability. I also really liked their short but quite powerful discussion on the difference and the necessity to separate shame from guilt. I think it was about 10 pages, but I found it very impactful. Several of the other articles were more like personal stories and examples of moments when people chose transformative justice or chose to try transformative justice over going to the police, for example. The one that I just read, the last one in this section, was honestly harrowing. It was a story, it's called Transforming Family, A Story of Accountability. It was a story of a girl growing up being abused by her father, and how even once she was able to leave that environment, kind of like witnessing him start a new family and continue those cycles of abuse, and the choices that she made and the connections that she made. A couple of them were talking about people within progressive organizations, often leaders or significant people being accused of sexual assault, and kind of like that organization's response to it and the community's response to it. So again, essentially we just got a lot of different examples of people choosing to try to find justice and healing in ways outside of the policing system. And I think what's really powerful is most of them demonstrate and speak explicitly to the fact that it's not just the cases where transformative justice has like succeeded perfectly and everything's gone swimmingly that we can learn from. In fact, it's often the cases where things are a bit more messy and sometimes maybe fail that we learn a lot from too. And indeed, at the end of one of the essays that I loved called Black Queer Feminism as Practice, they literally say, it is in the missteps, in the call-outs and call-ins and through trial and error that our ideologies and actions become more aligned. That is why constant reflexivity of praxis is so important. We are building the plane as we fly it, and hindsight is and always will be 2020. So obviously, just by the inherent fact that we're dealing with injustice, we're dealing with harm, there's a lot of like quite triggering discussions and content. So yes, it is difficult to read at times. Some of the stuff is really horrible, but equally it's done in a way, all of them are done in a way that feels very intentional with the sharing. It's not just like trauma dumping for the sake of it, right? Like they're sharing specific lessons about transformative justice. And so because of that, even though it's difficult to read, it also feels empowered and beautiful and strong. Obviously, I'm on a little bit of a roll, having read 80 pages in one afternoon. It's a lot for me, given that I haven't really read anything in like 3 or 4 weeks now. Normally, I could definitely read a book like this length in a day, but right now I'm sort of feeling the need to just pause and like mull over what I've just read in that first part. Just let those voices and those perspectives marinate a little bit. The next section, part 2, is called We Got This, Toolkits and Roadmaps. So I am really looking forward to it. I am really enjoying this overall. Yeah, I think we're just gonna otherwise have a pretty chill evening. Hang out with Ollie, hang out with Blair when he gets home, have some dinner, all that good stuff. I might do a little bit more reading later this evening, but I'm not sure. I think I'll probably just see you in the morning.
Do whatever you want, I'll settle for nothing, as long as we can keep the fire. I'll do whatever you do, follow you anywhere, if our chances are getting brighter. But I want you to know, I can't help but fight this feeling. I want you to try, imagine living without it, so let's go.
friends, it is Saturday evening, so I didn't film yesterday, although I just had my appointment, and I did go to Savers and I picked up a bunch of really cool stuff, and there's one thing I need to show you. Today's been a pretty chill day. I didn't get out of bed until like 1 o'clock because I was reading, and then after that we went on like a little coffee date. We tidied up the house a bit, we had some dinner, and we had our little Lego date. We've been taking it in turns every other week to basically pick a date of some kind. It might be going out to dinner, that's what Blair picked last week, or it could just be something like intentional that we do at home. And I just had the thought last week that sitting down and making some Lego together could be quite fun. Anyway, as I mentioned, I did spend my morning reading. I have read like about 80 pages again, so I'm well into part 2. I haven't finished it though because it's a little bit longer than part 3 was, but I'm up to page 167. So I've read 15 chapters, and wow, this second part kind of really kicked everything into gear. Essentially, if I had to kind of try and tell you about like an overarching theme for part 2, so far it has been people literally talking about examples of how they, or like an organization or community that they're in, have gone through a process of transformative justice, and in particular kind of people verbalizing or writing down the different steps to processes that they've taken, all the kind of like secondary processes that have been useful in a process of transformative justice. So in this section, we have literally received like steps to the process. We've received like different questions to consider. There was even like this little exercise to do. So although I'm quickly learning that each and every time that the process of transformative justice is undertaken by a group of people, it seems like there must be a level of flexibility and kind of creativity, which means that not every process is exactly the same. So it's not that anybody is seeking to tell you exactly what to do in order to be great at transformative justice, like the exact steps that must be taken. Instead, it's a bunch of people who are kind of sharing the steps and the frameworks, I suppose, that have been useful for them and their communities. And I'm just finding it really, really interesting, I guess is the best way for me to put it. Like there are still harder moments and harder subjects that are tackled, like especially in the examples that are given, but for the most part, this second part has been very practical. And this book is just getting me to think an awful lot, which I think is awesome. I love it when a book does that. In particular, I'm thinking about some of the feelings and thoughts I had around my reading experience when I read Doppelganger by Naomi Klein. Also today, I saw a video by Sim Kern, who is a creator that I love and admire, talking about like how people are saying that it doesn't matter if celebrities or politicians like change their minds and their actions about what's happening in Gaza right now. Basically, a lot of people are saying, and they feel that these people have taken too long to kind of come around to the right side and to do something meaningful. Like they've waited 7 months, that's too long, which means that it doesn't matter what they do from this point on, they will never be forgiven, they will never be accepted into the fold. And Sim was using an analogy of their experience working as a teacher and being called in to help with like difficult classrooms, and how they have found, both through their own experience but through the research that they've read, punishment and shame just like don't work in changing people's behavior. Instead, it's positive reinforcement that is most effective most of the time. And so they were kind of talking about this, right? Like the idea that if we want more people, especially people with influence and with power, to actually start acting in ways that would benefit Palestinians and hopefully lead to resolutions and justice, would that mean that we would have to be more forgiving and more accepting of however long it might take some of those people to actually act? And while not exactly transformative justice per se, I do feel like in what Sim was talking about, there's definitely things that I'm reading in this book that are kind of like correlating, I suppose. Especially when people are writing in this book about, you know, like the goals, like what is it we're actually trying to achieve and what's the best way to achieve that. I think another thing this book is making me think about is the ways in which we externalize the responsibility that we have to one another, and how it seems like to me in reading, you know, what little I have of transformative justice kind of framework so far, that in order for healing to take place for people who have experienced harm, it's not necessarily that like these people are really even seeking punishment a lot of the time. Like that's not necessarily what will help them. Instead, it seems even outside of what happens with or to the perpetrator, for example, how a community responds to somebody and rallies around somebody and helps somebody and affirms and validates somebody's experience when they have been a victim of harm seems to have so much more impact on their healing journey, which is something I kind of like vaguely knew, right? But I suppose this book is making me think about how important that is to justice itself and to liberation, and how that piece of the puzzle is as much a part of transformative justice as like whatever happens to the perpetrator. And I suppose that's the part that I'm finding almost more compelling. Anyway, all of that to say is that I'm continuing to really enjoy this book, and I love it when a book like makes me feel like I'm having a conversation with it, when I'm really thinking about examples from my own life or things that I've heard and seen people talking about online, whatever. When a book can help me think about the stuff that I've experienced or am experiencing in a new way, or help me recontextualize things a little bit, or just give more context, help me imagine different possibilities and different outcomes. I love that. That's one of my favorite things about reading, and this book is doing that for me. Anyway, like I said yesterday, I did pop into Savers for a little bit. I just was in the mood. I haven't been on like a good Savers run since when I filmed that like book haul video that I did a little while ago when I visited a bunch of op shops. But it's been even longer since I like went through clothes. Like I was clothes shopping at an op shop. And I came away with a handful of items that I'm thrilled about. There's so much color, so much fun in all of them. I've washed them today and they're currently drying, so I don't have anything to show you. But of course, I did take a peek at the book section, even though I was more there for clothes this time round. And I found something so exciting that I literally squealed. I literally squealed right there in the middle of Savers. And I'm not sorry about it. So you might remember that a couple of years ago, I read a book called Carpentaria by Alexis Wright. She's an Indigenous author who is like highly acclaimed and celebrated. She recently just won the Stellar's Prize, I think for the second time, with a book that I bought a week ago called Praiseworthy. I mean, it's massive, so I don't know when I'm going to get to it, but I love Alexis Wright, at least what I've read from her, which is Carpentaria. So anyway, my point is I love that book, and I have such a sense of like reverence and respect for that book and Alexis Wright. And when I was at Savers, I found this, which is obviously a beautiful, beautiful hardback copy of Carpentaria, which is a book that came out in 2006, and I have never seen a hardcover copy. So I assumed that maybe when it was first released, it came out in hardcover, and so this is what that was. And I was already excited. I was already excited to have a beautiful, beautiful edition of a book that I love so much. But then I opened it up. And here, I don't know if you can see, but it says limited hardback edition, number 596 of 1000, and it is signed by Alexis Wright. It's a limited edition hardcover copy of Carpentaria, and I got it for $4. I could not believe it. Now, I don't necessarily know if this is like technically worth all that much. Like, that's not why I was excited. I was excited just to find such a special copy of a book that I adore. So yes, colorful new clothes are always exciting, but that book, that was something special. But with that excitement out of the way, I am going to go wind down and read a little bit more of my book and settle in for the evening. Good morning, friends, and good news. I have finished my book. It is the first book I finished in over a month, so I am chuffed, as you can imagine. Ollie's here. She's had a haircut, so that's why she's looking a little different since the last time you saw her. We have also already had our Patreon live chat, so although I didn't finish the book before we had our live chat, I'd read a decent amount of it, so I was pretty happy with myself. And I always look forward to our chats because I always feel like I get a lot out of them. Anyway, now that I've finished the book, I would say my overall feeling about the book is definitely positive, and at the end of the day, I just feel like it was a very interesting read. I don't know that I learned a lot explicitly, but I feel like I had a lot of opportunities to reflect, and I was allowed a bit of an access and a look into processes and frameworks that people are using, and the ways that they're working, the ways that they're maybe not working as well as people want them to, but ultimately just kind of seeing how people are trying so many different approaches and trying so many different alternatives. Some because they don't have any other choice, some because they just genuinely want a different option for their communities. There were a few more conversations in the second half of the book that I really appreciated. One was in particular around like moral purity and righteousness, and how even though I think currently we have a tendency towards that on the left in some circles, we all know that it's very rarely useful or effective in achieving our end goals, and several of the people in this book spoke about how it's definitely something that gets in the way of transformative justice approaches. I know I've already spoken about this topic from one of the earlier chapters, but again, something that came up was the topic of shame. And I suppose it's just something that I find really interesting and compelling, both within this framework, but also just like the concept itself, and how being in a place of shame can be so harmful, not only to ourselves, but like results in really harmful actions a lot of the time, or at the very least often stops us from being able to engage with beneficial actions. I think like before though, my major kind of takeaway from this was how important community response is when people disclose harm. And again, even aside from what may or may not happen to perpetrators of harm through a process of transformative justice, I think the idea of allowing justice to be victim or survivor led, and the ways that people are trying to achieve that, although not perfect, although often messy, is such an important goal. In our live chat, my friend Laura pointed out that she wasn't even always sure exactly who this book was for, and I totally get that. I felt the same way quite a lot of the time reading this. In a way, this book felt quite insular to like the people and the communities like the writers are a part of. Like there were even a couple of articles where it literally felt like the person writing it was talking about an example that they, a process that they've been through and where it had been maybe not very successful, but they were talking about it in a way that kind of felt like defensive, I guess, which honestly did leave me feeling a little removed from the project of the book. But overall, I did really enjoy it. And like I did an awful lot of highlighting. I did an awful lot of reflecting and thinking while I was reading, both about transformative justice and what that might look like in my own spaces and my own communities, but also other kind of like tangential things that like shame. Shame kept coming up for me. So even though it was not perfect and it was really quite heavy in a lot of ways, I'm still really glad that I read this book, and I'm especially glad we got to read it together and the few of us who were in the live chat got to have a chat about it. So anyway, I suppose now that we have finished a book, we can finish this vlog. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. I know it was a very chill, kind of casual vlog, but I had fun making it, so I hope you enjoyed hanging out with me. A big thank you as always to my patrons over on Patreon, especially big thank you to Livia, Lynette Brown, and Marie, and a special thank you to Thea and Laura. But anyway, there we go. We did it. We read a book and we made a video, so I'm feeling pretty happy. I hope you're having a good week. Let me know in the comments below what you're reading at the moment, if you're reading anything, or just what you're up to, and I will see you again soonish, hopefully. Until then, so much love. Bye.